Good day, students. Mr. Deegan back here for another installment of VidNotes videos. And we're going to build on what we learned last lesson about Martin Luther, the German monk who supported and really sparked the Protestant Reformation. So today we're going to be talking about the supporting cast of Martin Luther, people who inspired him and people who were inspired by him. First, we have John Calvin, then King Henry VIII of England, and Henry's daughter, Queen Elizabeth I, also of England, Jan Hus, John Wycliffe, and Johann Gutenberg, the German inventor. Before Martin Luther came to the earth, there were reformers who inspired him to criticize the Catholic Church. He didn't live in a vacuum. So two of those reformers who we're going to talk about now are Jan Hus and John Wycliffe. They were dissenters. Dissenter is a person who disagrees, and they disagreed with the Catholic Church. They both were supportive of translating the Bible into their own languages, not Latin. Latin was the Catholic Church's main language. And if you didn't know Latin, if you weren't an upper class scholar, then you couldn't read the Bible for yourself. Somebody had to tell you what was in it. John Wycliffe, let's talk about him first. He was from England, and he was an educated man. He went to Oxford University in England, and he later became a professor and a theologian, someone who studies religion. He believed the Bible was Christianity's ultimate authority, and he created the first handwritten English Bibles in 1380. Why was this important? Because peasants and the lower class could now read the Bible for themselves. This was very important to John Wycliffe. Wycliffe also rejected the clergy's wealth. Clergy meaning those who were leaders in the Catholic Church. And he rejected the collection of indulgence money. In a previous lesson, we talked about indulgences, which were basically the Catholic Church's way of forgiving people's sins. And this is a phrase John Wycliffe said and wrote: "Crown, cloth, nor money make no priest, but power that Christ giveth." Talking about a true believer of the Christian faith. How did the Catholic Church punish this critic, John Wycliffe? Well, he died of natural causes in 1384, but about 40 years later, in 1428, Pope Martin V declared Wycliffe a heretic, an outlaw, and this pope ordered that Wycliffe's body be exhumed, dug out of the ground, and burned. And this is a sketch that shows people burning the body of John Wycliffe. They wanted to tarnish his legacy. They wanted to disrespect him, even in death. Like John Wycliffe, Jan Hus, there are a couple different ways you can say his name. We're going to stick with Jan Hus. He criticized the Catholic Church very early on, before Martin Luther. He was from an area in Eastern Europe called Bohemia. Today, Bohemia is the Czech Republic, not too far from Russia. Who is Jan Hus? He was a priest, philosopher, and a follower of Wycliffe. Hus came a little bit after Wycliffe. Like Wycliffe, Hus was a supporter of translating the Bible from Latin so Bohemians could read it for themselves. And Jan Hus also was targeted by the Catholic Church. The church found Hus guilty of heresy, of being an outlaw, and in 1415, they burned him alive at the stake. And this drawing shows that incident. Hus is tied to a stake, and he is about to burn alive for criticizing the Catholic Church. Another John comes to power after Martin Luther, and this is John Calvin. He set up a Christian community in Switzerland in Central Europe. He was born in France. John Calvin was a French pastor and theologian who criticized the Catholic Church. He was 8 years old when Martin Luther wrote his 95 Theses, so this made an impact on him. One of John Calvin's major beliefs was predestination, the belief that God has decided all things beforehand, including which people will be eternally saved from damnation, saved from hell. John Calvin fled France in 1533 when the king ordered all Protestants arrested in France. And he moved to Geneva, Switzerland in 1541 and was asked to lead a theocracy there. What's a theocracy? It's a government that is controlled entirely by religious leaders and whose laws are religiously based. So John Calvin went to Geneva and left this legacy of Christianity that had strict rules. If you lived in Geneva, Switzerland, you couldn't wear bright clothes, you couldn't gamble or play cards. It was a very strict society. Here's King Henry VIII. He's known for his fashion. So look at a picture of him. You see the fashion of the day in the 1500s in England. King Henry VIII was a devout Catholic. He became king in 1509, and the Pope at the time called him the defender of the faith. However, that would not last. He would fall out of favor with the Pope. Why? Because King Henry VIII wanted to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Why? Because Catherine could not bear him a male heir to the English throne. When King Henry VIII died, he wanted a son to take over for him, but his first wife could not give him that son. Now, King Henry VIII wanted a divorce, but the Pope refused to annul or cancel Henry's marriage. It was against the Catholic religion, according to the Pope. So King Henry VIII took matters into his own hands, and Henry ordered the British Parliament to legalize the divorce and create a Church of England, which would later become the Anglican Church. King Henry VIII went over the Pope and overruled the Pope. And then Henry VIII marries a younger woman, Anne Boleyn, in 1533. And King Henry VIII would go on to have 6 wives in total, and they are here. And these are the 3 children that come out of the marriages of Henry VIII. The most successful of the children would actually be not the son, Edward, but Elizabeth I. She would become queen. We're going to talk about her now. Here she is on the throne. And what did Queen Elizabeth I of England accomplish? Well, she was respected as a woman leader. She brought stability to England and ruled for 44 years. She made the Anglican Church the only legal church of England, and she brought religious peace. She pleased the Catholics in England by keeping traditional clothing in the church, and she pleased the Protestants of England by having the church service in English, not Latin. And she said the priests in the Anglican Church can marry. So she was able to please both the Catholics and the Protestants, which was not easy to do. She also was a good politician. She worked to expand the English Empire, and she had a war with Spain that we'll talk about now. Elizabeth I helps England defeat the Spanish Armada, the Spanish Navy, which was very strong at this time. So here's the matchup. Mary I and Philip II of Spain versus Elizabeth I of England. What were the problems between these two groups? Well, religion. The Spanish were very Catholic, and the English broke away from the Catholic Church. The English were pirates. They had many sailors who would steal Spanish goods as they traded them across the Atlantic Ocean. Also, Philip II, he thought he had a rightful claim to the English throne, and that was a point of tension. Who won? The English, of course. Elizabeth I defeats the Spanish Armada, and the victory improves England's international reputation, and it solidifies Elizabeth I as a good leader in the eyes of those in England and those in Europe. Moving on, who spreads Luther's ideas during the Protestant Reformation? There's one man whose invention was so important, and that man is Johann Gutenberg of Germany. What does he do? He borrows past ideas from European and Asian inventors to create the movable type printing press. Some would say this invention is more important than the internet. And why? It made books affordable for peasants and common people and increased literacy. When you can read for yourself, you can think for yourself. When you can think for yourself, you will not get manipulated by powerful people, rulers, and politicians. The first book that Gutenberg's printing press printed was the Bible. So it relates to the Protestant Reformation in that way. People could read the Bible for themselves. All right, we're almost done. We're rounding that corner. We have the summary questions left. Until next time, this is Mr. Deegan, signing off.